Hello, everyone. I'm here with Patricia Walsh, and we are gathering together today to just have a conversation to go back in time a bit in our EA travels and to talk some about the conference coming up in October. Patricia is going to be a guest speaker or one of the speakers, the many evolutionary astrologers that will be speaking at the conference, online conference, October 6th through the 8th. So, welcome, Patricia. It's good to see you.
I know it's been a long time. We are the oldie moldies, aren't we?
We are,
We're
we are
like the original tribe.
we're one of the Sag peeps. We've got a lot of Sagittariuses in this first 9, 10 days of December, actually.
Yeah,
So anyway, yeah, it's been at least 20 years, I want to say now. You were in the last two schools that Jeffrey Wolf Green taught.
I do always tell that story because it
Oh,
is, it is, you know, when I first found the Pluto book, I was living in Germany. And during that time in my life, I was very kind of estranged from the outer world because I didn't speak German well. And I was there for work and my relationship. I was married. And so I really didn't like living in Germany, but those two things kept me there. And so I remember coming across the Pluto book on one of my trips home, and brought it back and just devoured it. And I remember saying to myself, this is the only astrology book you'll ever need, right? Because remember that one
yeah.
growing up? Yeah, whoever did that one. And then, so I actually started applying all the things I didn't know about the online forum. I didn't know about any of that. Because again, I was like in this headspace of just being kind of isolated. And so I just absorbed it and started applying it I was doing table work at the time with people, which is more, kind of healing work with shamanic overtones. And I would like journey into people's lives and things like that. And then I'd look at the chart and I'd integrate it with the chart, and it all made so much sense. And it was so like, there it is in black and white. And so that's how I was kind of teaching myself. And it wasn't until I came back to the US in 2000 that I realized, oh my God, like Jeffrey's a real person. Like, oh my God, like he teaches schools. And so I got on the message board, and then he said he was going to be teaching a class that I signed up, of course. And then I don't know who was working with him at the time, assisting, got an email that said, he had an illness and they had to cancel the school. And I was like, wait. And then he came to me in a dream, and he said, it was like, I don't know, within a couple nights or something, he said, it's okay. I'm just ill and I'll be coming back, and I just need some time out and I'll be teaching again. Well, a year later, or thereabouts, I think I'm gonna say it was probably a year later, or maybe several months. I don't remember the exact time. Not too long. He put up the Sedona. Was it Sedona? No, Denver. Wherever we did those. Yeah, Denver. And so of course I went, and they ended up being the last two schools he ever taught.
Yeah, I think they were like 6 months apart or something.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
I'll never forget it when you showed up because I was like, wow, this girl is smart. You're like, front row, let's go. Like
I remember sitting there with I had an ankle brace, an ankle cast on, or a walking boot. I remember because I snapped my ankle. Um, I remember sitting there with my foot out on the floor. Yeah, yeah.
it was when though not for the second one, I don't think, just for the
No,
first one.
not the second one, the first one. Yeah.
Well, there's this. I mean, I'll never forget you being there in your presence. You were just you were devouring it at the school. You were right there and in it. And were you already trained in DMP at this time?
So that had to be around 2001. So I was about to graduate from my DMP training, and I had already been collecting these massive amounts of yes, yeah, actually, now that I think about it, yes, I was, because by the time I went to graduate from the EA school, What I had been doing then was I was doing regression, DMP, as you know, deep memory process for those people that don't know, which is a school that Roger Woolger, the author of Other Lives, Other Selves, founded. And I studied with Roger also. I met Roger and Jeffrey at the same time in person
Wow.
in 2000 when I came back to the US. I trained with him for 2 years, and then I apprenticed with him for 2 years, and then I was teaching the school. And we kind of taught together, I think, as you know, for about 10 years, Roger and I. Um, so so I had already been doing massive amounts of regressions. Plus, we had students, and I would get their cases and cast the charts for their clients. So I already had hundreds of cases. And what I would do when I say cases is, hold on, let me just close a window here so it's not binging. What I mean when I say cases is the past life story, you know. And since deep memory process is so in depth, just like EA is, I mean, it's not what you would call past life tourism, you know. Deep memory process is a deep trauma therapy, and it's very comprehensive, and the training is a 2 year training. It's not like going away for a weekend and, you
Right.
know, calling yourself a regressionist. It's a serious 2 year training. And you know, we're trained in a lot of, you know, soul fragmentation, dissociation, all these different aspects that we know in evolutionary astrology are a big part of why we have these karmas, why we do these repetitive patterns. That is not, it's way beyond the mental level. We know that, you know, you can sit and do all the positive affirmations you want, you know, but when you're in the grip of a complex, you're, like I always say, either you run your complexes or your complexes run you. So, so when I say cases, it had been the story, and then I would look at the chart. And by the story, I mean, you know, what were the complexes in the past life? What was the past life? And then the death process, and then the afterlife process. So it really, the way that, you know, we do regression really dovetails with evolutionary astrology, because I could already see the energy of the soul unwinding itself through that healing process. And when you look at the South Node in Pluto in the chart, and you know, you're in the story with somebody, or you know somebody's story, you're like, oh my God, this is so literal. And then when they get to the Bardo, and you again guiding them through this healing process, it's like you release what I call this kind of libidinal energy within the soul. It's all of that energy that's been bound by the trauma, right? It's been bound by the complex, and it's automatically released when the complex gets unwound, and the consciousness automatically slingshots to the polarity point in the North Node. I mean, the language that people are using in the Bardo when they're, you know, when they're finally free of the complex, when all of the patterns and things have been worked through in the afterlife. And then, you know, the guides are there and they're helping, and all of it, it just is so amazing. It's like, so I had hundreds of these. Like, I'd take a chart and I'd write the person's story on the back, right? And you know, have the chart in the front. And I was just doing it for my own learning. And I had hundreds of those, I think, by the time I was at the EA school. And then
Wow.
I remember it was right before I went to the EA school. Maybe it was the second one. I don't remember. Might have been the second one, that I was at home and somebody had asked me to come lecture for them. And without getting into big long story, I had my own complexes about public speaking, which fortunately were healed by regression, or I'd never be doing what I do today. But I was terrified of public speaking. Like, I would completely dissociate. But we did heal that through regression. But the point is, this is before I had gotten to those stories. And, you know, I was kind of terrified to go give this lecture. So I had all of these, it was for like the Connecticut Astrological Association. I had all these cases out on the table, and Roger and I were sharing a house at the time at a practice where we ran the trainings from. And and I had all these cases on, and Roger comes trotting by to go get his tea in the morning or something. He goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I'm looking over cases for lecture." And he offhandedly goes, "Well, there's enough material there for a book." And all of a sudden, like, this freaking light bulb. Like I hadn't realized I'm collecting like all of this kind of,
course.
it's empirical data, as empirical as you can get with two of
Wow.
these esoteric subjects such as past lives and astrology. But it is actually a field of what's the word I was going to say? Not study. It's a field of research, more or less called phenomenological research, right? That so here it is, and I have this whole. So I think I went to the EA school, and I remember asking Jeffrey if I could have a minute of his time. You were there. This is when we met.
Yeah,
This
right.
is when we met, right? Because we ended up going out to dinner later with Rose. And I
Right.
remember I had said, I kind of, asked Jeffrey if I could have a minute of his time on a break. And I told him I've been doing all this research and so on and so forth. And he was like, I've been waiting for somebody to write that book.
Wow.
So that was the second kind of like, bang, you need to write this book. It still took me 5 years, but I did.
Yeah. Karmic Complexes. What's the full title? Karmic Complexes.
Understand, I probably have one floating around here. Oh, here's one
Yeah.
in my
I have
pile.
for those who don't already
Here's
have the
one in
book.
my
I have,
pile. Understanding Karmic Complexes.
I
It's
do have your book,
fabulous.
Patricia.
Yeah.
I just forgot the first word. Understand. That's awesome. So, okay, I have to think about this because
Oh,
last,
so then we went out to dinner. I remember, and that's when I went. Rose too, I think, or that was at the conference.
I think you
I
might
don't
have,
remember. I just remember sitting across the table from you when we were talking, and I was like, kind of in this stunned, like, oh my God, I didn't realize the last 4 years of my life I've been preparing all of these cases for this. I was still kind of processing, wow, this is really something I need to do. And I think I said something to you about it, and you were
I
like,
do remember that. Were you
yeah.
having a Pluto transit on your sun, I think?
Oh, Pluto, exactly. Yeah, see, this is the thing too. People like worry about Pluto, and I don't blame you worrying about Pluto.
Right.
And I mean, granted, I'm a ninth house sad sun I'm a ninth house sad sun conjunct the MC with Mercury there. So I get that, there's a bit of grace in that, right? And to have Pluto crossing that. I had I had pretty horrendous Pluto initiations, but they were all to the purpose of, getting me to do the work I came here to do.
Yeah.
And that Pluto, yeah, it was exactly that Pluto was transiting my sun. And it was incredibly empowering.
I don't know if you remember this situation I wanted to bring up. It was the first of the two schools you went to, and somebody was volunteering their chart. It was a relationship class, and he asked her if she was sure. And she said, "Yeah, I'm sure. I really want you to do my chart in class." And his classic response, Jeffrey, was, "Prepare to be exposed." Right.
Mm,
And she had a lot of Aquarian planets, so she was always very cool about things. I had never seen her cry myself. And within 30 seconds, she was sobbing. And I'll never forget this girl in the back who went to Harvard, of all places, raises her hand and says, "Excuse me. So if we get about 10% of what you just saw in this chart to share with this client, would we still be able to help people?" And he said, "Absolutely." So obviously he has a consciousness that can see way more than most of us. And with all the
mm,
work you're doing with DMP too, you have obviously more capacity to see into the past lives, potentially in your students as well. But I thought that was just the most incredible thing. I'm so happy that she asked that question because evolutionary astrology can be overwhelming. And we can see a chart, you can teach it till you're blue in the face, right? But until you're actually either living a transit or even working with the DMP work that you're doing to really emotionally, you know, be in those symbols, it's hard to really grasp sometimes the
mm.
fullness of what it can offer. And I did love that because in a way we aren't, I know for myself, you can tell me how you're feeling about this, but I still every day am growing deeper into this understanding of the work and the symbols. They continue to reveal themselves to me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
So
astrology in general is like that. But then when you're talking about the complex, I mean, the way, so evolutionary astrology itself is designed or designed, it is a modality that gives this kind of blueprint, not just of the human psyche, but that which lies behind the human psyche, right? The soul. So, that's not something. The human psyche itself is complex, the soul is complex, right? So there's always more to learn, to deepen, to unravel, for sure.
so when you do regression work with people, are you always getting their birth information to look at a chart before it happens, or not necessarily?
I don't have to, no. I mean, and they're independent of each other. I use charts without, regression and vice versa. But I mean, it's a great, for me, because I don't know, in regression, it's kind of like evolutionary astrology. People kind of come to you already triggered. They are like in it because their soul knows they're going to somebody who could deal with this thing that they've been trying, in my case, in regression, trying to get rid of for 2, 3, 4,000 years, right? And so their soul is like, you, and I know it. I know because it happens to me. I mean, even just walking down the street, I mean, people just get triggered, and they're just like, you, what do you do? Right? But it's all on a soul level. The soul is like going, here's a person who can help alleviate this thing, right? And so when people come to an evolutionary astrology reading, they're magnetized on that level, if they know it or not, right? So it's the same with regression. So to me, the chart is irrelevant in it was exciting to me when I was doing it with regression, certainly research wise and learning wise, and to me, indispensable in my learning. But I'm not going to say it's irrelevant. It's a useful diagnostic tool. But what the person is presenting is what's the most important thing. But it does help a lot of times in regression work when I look down at the chart and somebody's talking to me about something, because not everybody's so easy to read, like where is that, what is the complex that's speaking to me, where are they coming from, and I can look down and, in my mind I have categories of complexes by archetype just because I've been doing it for 20 years, right? People keep saying to me, they're like, that's the book you need to write, that's the
Oh,
next
there
one,
you go. I
you
love
need to
that.
write that one, right? All of the complexes by archetype. um so I can look down and see the archetypes and go, oh, okay, that's it, and then I can dig further to open up that complex, with the person. And it is also incredibly satisfying to see again when they are in the process, how their soul just, like I always use that word, it's slingshots to the north node, it's slingshots, like for example, if I was working on it's, and I always think it's easy to make these to make the point with stories, right? Like literal. So let me think of a like a let me think of a polarity. uh yeah, like let's go Virgo Pisces, okay? So somebody's on the Virgo Pisces axis and you just ran a story with them about, really limited small life, servitude, feeling, disconnected maybe. Oh, I've had lots of these nun lives that, they just lived these little lives and they felt disillusioned with Christianity at the end of their life, or maybe, even worse, they were sexually abused and by priests, and then they, got mad at God because of that, the Christian God, and died with that imprint. That would be a pretty classic Virgo Pisces thing. And then, so then they die, and they're still angry at God, and you're working with them in the Bardo, and maybe their images come to them, and maybe some higher guides come or whatever. But what I'm saying is, at some point, as the complex starts to unravel, it's like they open up into the expansiveness of the polarity point or the north node, and their language will be something like, oh my God, God's everywhere. Like that would be a classic one, right? Like God's everywhere. It's everything. I don't have to be limited by beliefs. I don't, and that would be
Wow.
like actual realizations that they're getting that came from that tiny little squished, suppressed life, that was opened up. The complex was opened up and it was healed. And once it was healed, instantly they're in their evolutionary potential, right? And it isn't just mental. I mean, it literally is. These people leave sessions and they are like, that's it, man. Like, yeah. They're like that,
Right.
like forever changed, right?
Oh, it's incredible. So rewarding, so rewarding. I like your next book idea. You've got to do it. You've got
Yeah.
to. It sounds
At
like,
least do a video series on it or
oh,
something,
definitely. It sounds fascinating. Love it.
Mhm.
So, now when people are in these sessions, are they conscious?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
everything,
Yeah.
they're like hypnotized. It's not like being hypnotized.
It's not, people have a misnomer about what hypnotism is, but, because they think of stage hypnosis or something. But we use a process because Roger was a Jungian, so we use a process that Jung would identify more as active imagination. Um, and the understanding is that it's not that we need to get into trance, we actually need to wake up from trance, right? That's a
Oh,
famous saying by Erickson, right? There's like, no, the problem isn't getting people into trance, it's getting them out of the trances that we're living, right? And so we really tend to think that past life stuff is so deeply buried and so on. And to a certain degree it is, but not when you are triggered in a complex. When you have when your conscious mind, your persona, your ego self is overtaken by subconscious content, which can happen, as easily as road rage. That would be an example, right? Somebody's, Mr. Calm guy, and then all of a sudden somebody cuts them off and they're like, oh, green-eyed monster, right? That's an example, though.
yeah,
Right in that moment, that's deeper content surfacing. Now, our way of going about life and the ego's function in our life is to quickly push that down and go back to the constructed persona, right? Because that's inconsistent. Like we always say, the ego likes consistency. The soul is irrational.
yeah,
Soul is irrational to the ego, just
yeah,
like our nighttime dreams are rational to the ego, but they are speaking of a deeper level of us. So when I'm working with people, and our style of working with people is to get to the trigger. So if somebody comes and they're saying, I have anxiety, when they want to work on that, I'm going to open up that complex with them, getting them deeper and deeper into the feeling of the trigger. The more you get out of your head, the deeper you go into the content. This is not a mental process, right? So, and that's what, Jeffrey always said, soul healing happens on the emotional level.
yeah,
And a lot of, I'm going to say it, a lot of hypnotherapy is mental level only.
yeah.
They skip over the trauma, they skip over the emotion, because it's messy, right? No, we're the opposite. We're like, screw your head, forget, I don't care what you're
For
thinking.
sure.
Yeah, really, like, I'm so not interested in your compensation or your defenses at all. I'm interested in this terror that's in your belly. Let's go there, right? And that's what I do, right? So I actually get the conscious mind out of the way. It's not by trance, it's by focusing on the affect, enlarging the affect to the point that they get consumed by it on the mat, bang, you're in the story. There's no escaping it. I mean, people are amazed at how quickly they go into it's like that, right? But
Well,
then you're in the core of the story. There's no, oh, and Cleopatra, and there's none of this mental fantasy stuff that
right,
goes on, right? You go to the emotional core, you've gone to the heart of the complex in the soul,
right. Absolutely.
right?
Gosh, it's so perfect for your chart. I think I don't want to give it away here, but I'm pretty sure, don't you have a south node in the 11th and a north node in the 5th?
Yeah.
That access and soul dramas is your lecture coming up. So we've got the north node in the 5th house, and people are acting out. I mean, they're right back in that space or that relationship or that
Oh,
experience.
absolutely. And we use psychodrama to get people there too. I mean, no, we use a lot of different techniques. Deep memory process is a blend of Gestalt and psychodrama and active imagination. So it's all of these things, but it's designed that way. It's actually quite brilliantly designed that way to engage all the subtle bodies. Because again, as a society and where we are today in society, we are so materialistic, reductionist, mental level only. Everybody thinks that the head is, if I get it up here, I'm over it. And we know that I mean, we talk about spiritual bypassing, right? That's so far from the truth.
Right.
You can, whatever you want, we can do all kinds of crazy stuff in our head, right? Like in our work, like psychodrama, for example, Moreno, who was the founder of psychodrama, he used to say to people, come and talk about your problem. And they'd be like, oh, I'm so angry at my husband. He makes me, and then Moreno would give them 5 minutes to talk because that's the ego talking. And then he would say, shut up and show me. Show me. That no more words, show me. So then the person, and then when you engage on that level, you've already accessed the subconscious. You've already bypassed the conscious mind. So once you go to that level, you're in soul terrain, right? Because once somebody accesses that, they could be acting out all kinds of things that would be irrational to the ego compensate itself.
Right.
But you're in it, right? So then once they're there, you can get them right into, I mean, they're in the past life already.
Awesome. I mean, you so deep so fast. And so the soul drama, how to read the script is your title of the lecture coming up. Are you going to be showing us examples through the chart of these things being played out?
What I'd like to do, because to me, there's two kind of, I'm not going to say distinct, because to me, they go hand in hand. I use them both. But I know people have, I mean, a lot of my students have read Jeffrey's book, also studied with me, read my book, and they see my book is much more story based. And they get the print. I mean, people tell me all the time, they're like, I get this, like, I so relate to this story, and, whatever chapter, I'm like crying, and it's all my complex. And because it's a story, that's the power of story. So to me, I love story, right? Um, and I don't mean fantasy, I mean story. I love story. And so when the application of evolutionary astrology to me can be communicated to a client in different ways. And in one way, you can characterize and talk about the energy of the complex, what the person is stuck in, what are the characteristics, what are the, I'm using the word complexes, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And then talk to them, certainly then they can relate to how that's been in their life. And then you can go, there with them, and then you can outline for them or show them the direction of, this is the way out of that, right? This is what your soul's intending. This is where you can move beyond this particular whatever it is, this complex they're stuck in, and that it is part of their evolutionary plan. And there's all different ways that you can do that in the context of a session. On the other side of it, lots of times, well, because I mean, I've been working with, I mean, I've been working with past lives now for 20 years, but even before that, I was working with it in a more intuitive sense. So I can read them, I don't put it out there on a like business card, like, ooh, intuitive past lives. Because, to me, it's like reading shouldn't be a performance, right? And I'm not into performance level. I'm into moving material and helping people really get there. So story, just like indigenous people understand, story hits a place in the psyche that nothing else does, right?
Yeah.
And outside of that, story also bridges right brain and left brain. Because if I start to tell you a story, you're listening to me with your left, language, you're listening, right? But you're also creating your own associated imagery. So if I say, oh my God, there was this little girl and she was walking out of this old schoolhouse in the woods, you're already creating imagery, right? That is what bridges the right brain and the left brain. And that's why indigenous cultures didn't need to write stuff down, right? Because they would tell it in story that engaged the whole consciousness, which then gives you the retention, which is why they could tell the same, like the Aboriginal people in Australia, they could tell the same story for 5, 10,000 years. And it's remembered generation to generation, right? It's a way to communicate. So what I want to do in the lecture is I want to kind of address both of those. Like follow the breadcrumbs through the chart, right? What starting with, of course, the Pluto method, right? Here's Pluto, and here's the consciousness, and here's this kind of basic bottom line psychology and how that might have been formed in past lives, and then looking at the nodal condition, etc. But then at the same time, I also want to use maybe the same chart, maybe another one. I haven't plotted it out yet, and show the stories, right? And how people might also use those same symbols to intuit some stories or create some stories, not to there's caveats to that, because I don't believe in, when I tell people past lives I perceive, I always give them the preface that we can take this as if it's literal, or we can take it as if it's just a story that's going to speak to you on some level, right? So with that caveat, it can be very useful, because people are always, when I say that to them, they're like, yeah, yeah, tell me, and like 99.9% of the time, whenever I tell them, they're like, oh my God, that happened in this life. And, they're like, that makes so much sense. And of course, so they can relate to it, right, in that way. But to me, as long as but why not use this? Why not use our imaginations with the work also?
Absolutely. I mean, that's really how Jeffrey would teach this work to begin with. When you couldn't access something, even when you're looking at a chart and he wanting you to feel your way there and you're getting stuck, he would always encourage people to use their imagination, just to drop into that other layer level. That, and how does this feel when you look at this symbol or that symbol? And I can say early on, and still to this day, I don't ever write anything down when I'm with clients. I don't ever try. I don't like to keep things filed away that way. I remember story. If a client tells me something that's happened to them,
Yes.
I mean, I have a Cancer rising, so I feel it all first. I will never forget a story. I have a third house
Yeah.
Cancer too. I will never, ever, ever forget a story, especially if that soul has been traumatized or something major has happened. And that's right. I mean, that's the deeper layers and levels of our subconscious. I mean, the emotional door goes right to the soul, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, and story, I mean, I've regressed tens of thousands of people by now, and sometimes my memory used to be, better pre-menopause. I used to have an almost eidetic memory. Like, no, seriously, I did. Post-menopause, it's a little less, but I can meet somebody that I regressed 10 years ago, and I'd look at them and be like, "Do you remember seeing me?" And I'd go, they'd say, "Oh yeah, it was in that office in Norwalk," and I go, oh yeah, you were the young boy that was running down the road. It's like it downloads from the cloud. Like
Wow.
I remember the story and details of the story. So yes, story is so powerful. But
Right.
and we're talking about it in the sense of remembering, which is one aspect of story, but the other aspect that you pointed out, story, I mean, this is why we go to movies and cry. This is why Greek theater worked. Greek theater was meant to be a method of catharsis, of soul catharsis. They use that. It's like Shakespeare used that, like as a group therapy, right?
Yeah.
And so it can do that. I mean, and
Absolutely.
there's Native American people that work with just story in healing. Louis Mel Melodroma is one of them, where he actually just uses story with people, right? To have them start moving through the difficulties in their life and even enacting some parts of a character or something. I'm telling you, powerful.
That is that because it's relatable? Like when you're telling someone a story and they're imagining it's somebody else's story, but it's their story. Does it make them relatable to that person? Does it make it feel?
Well, think of it like people go to movies and they get emotional and cry, and but this is also a point that I always make. Yes, movies, sometimes they're so predictable, right? They're so, blueprint, right? Hollywood plots are not always all that great anymore. Not like the good old days. They used to be good movies. No, I'm just kidding. But different people can be sitting there at the movie and somebody would be moved by something that someone else isn't, right? Which is it's in the story and the identification with the character, but it's also because it's hitting something in them, which is unique to them, right? I mean, it's in mythology too, right?
Totally.
Right? Mythology it's lasting for that reason because it touches something deep in our archetypal reservoir,
You're sh-
right?
you're attracting clients that are also going to be triggering your own traumas from the past too. Is that must have happened early on, did it?
Did yeah.
So how this is a good question because as evolutionary astrologers or people wanting to get into this work or even DMP, how did you work with that emotion when your own stuff was getting triggered? How do you work with that as a um, healer?
I had one complex that took a while to took a couple years of work to unravel all the threads to really fully clear it out of my psyche. And if somebody came with that similar, or somebody came with that complex, I would dissociate. I would just fuzz out, right? And it happened maybe two or three times where I had to not do the session, which is fine,
Yeah.
right? I mean, and any therapeutic work, that's what supervision is for, right? You go and then you go and you do your own work, right?
Right.
For the most part, that was only one complex was like that. I mean, I had a fear of public speaking. I could still work with people
Hmm.
that were in that and not be triggered. But I had one complex that was very easily triggered because it had to do with astral, it had to do with black magic.
Mm.
So that would and anyway, it's a big long story I won't get into, but the point is it would trigger this dissociative complex in me. And then I was unable to work with people. So I would say, in any work we do one-on-one with people, be aware of your limitations, be aware of your capacity, right? And if you get triggered during a session or something, then you need to take it to your healer, your therapist, whoever you work with, right? And make sure you do right by the client, which means if you are unable to deliver what they came for because you're triggered, end the session, refer them, right? And move on, and then
Yeah.
get to work and do your own work.
I
Yeah.
think, yeah, absolutely. I was wondering in your work how that would play out for you, what you did to do that.
Well, my students ask me all the time because certainly as they're newer coming into it, they're triggered all over the place. And I keep saying, keep working on your complexes. The more you work on them, the more you have less triggers, really seriously. Like people can pretty much throw anything at me right now. 20 years later, I'm pretty much like, bring it on,
That's what it feels like. And you've got,
I've kind of seen it all, been there, done
okay, how
that.
many complexes are there?
Oh, goodness.
A hundred?
Anything can be, but anything can be a complex if it's constellated in your psyche that way. I mean, like, common ones that we can name, like, oh, an inferiority complex or a superiority complex, or, those but I mean, anything can be a complex if it's caused some kind of condensation or compression of energy in your psyche that doesn't allow you to navigate it in a comfortable way.
So when you're linking complexes with archetypes, there must be some kind of number when you're
I don't have a number. I mean, I haven't really listed them, but I mean, it's obvious, like, if you go like Aries could be like a rage complex, or
right.
or it can be a, Napoleon complex, or, it can be like, whatever, right? Like these kinds of things, you can kind of go through them. Um,
I love it.
a separation anxiety complex, right? There's different things I would associate with archetypes in that way.
I just love watching you work. I love how excited you still are about teaching and helping people. You just have that Sagittarian magnetism that I love so much. And are you
Well,
still in
you know what it is when you do what you love, right? It's like, come
that
on,
work?
what a blessing,
Right. The gift, isn't
what a
it?
grace, yeah, to have.
But I also feel you evolving in the work that you're doing. I can feel it in the way that you're talking, you're getting other ideas. Um, how have you experienced your own evolution just in life? Because I like to, when I'm talking with clients, I always encourage them to envision what it looks like for them to evolve. What's that? What has that been for you? I'm getting to the deeper piece or part of that trauma, that soul. To do you feel like the evolution of you as a teacher is being able to really go all the way into the center of something and walk them all the way out? I mean, how have you experienced your own evolution in this work?
Hmm. Well, certainly I have a confidence that comes from experience. And that's definitely different than my Virgo complex. Do you know what I mean? Like oh my God, did I do that right? And rip myself to pieces and, be all neurotic about it for 5 days, which would have been the old Pat. That doesn't
That's
happen
great. That's
anymore.
great that you shared that because you have a sixth house Pluto, right? I'm putting that.
Sixth house Pluto and Virgo, yeah.
So that's wonderful that someone you do have, and you even presented yourself very confident back in the day. But now you walk it, you live it, and there's just a presence about you, and I just love to witness. I love witnessing your growth over all these years, and all the people that you're able to help with
But
DMT.
when you ask me that question, now here's a point, right? When we talk about stuff that's real, right? When we talk about stuff that's real, pay attention to what you're feeling, right? Because you asked me that question about my evolution and my little stomach went beep, right? Because I realize and I know that I have not fully stepped into the potentiality of my North Node. I have not. I purposely hold myself back. I mean, I'm not going to say purposely, but there is a part of me that just wants to still be small. And I'm
Is it?
not saying that having a Leo North Node in the fifth house is about being, it's not big, but there is a part of me, yeah. I mean, yeah, no, there is a part of me that it makes me even a little sad that I'm like, oh, I'm copping out on my evolution,
No, I
you
don't
know.
think you're copping out at all. No, no, no. But I think so. If you combine the polarity or the North Node in Leo in the fifth with the polarity point of your Pluto, with
Pisces in the 12th.
Pisces, and so I think it's important too for all of us that so much of our evolution and progress we really make is not on an always on an outer platform or a stage, but how we feel we're evolving within ourselves. That's the best measure of all things. But you know, so do you think that though that there is, again, not to put you on the spot, but I think it helps people. What is that part of you that goes, is it a fear? Is it, what do you think?
Yeah, there's a resistance to and sometimes I think, okay, maybe it's just not for this life, it's for the next life, maybe it's just preparatory, because Virgo is a preparatory archetype, it's a kind of cleaning up, dusting up things and cleaning up things and getting ready for the next life.
I always tell people this too, Pat, because Mars is one of my favorite planets to talk about. It just really does come down to desire. And I do think that you've been doing everything that you wanted to be doing. And you've really had such a strong presence in the healing world, the astrological world. So um, I think it just, this thing makes you human. So you know,
Yeah.
it's beautiful. And also,
Well, it speaks to the reality of we are all works in progress, right?
exactly. I was just thinking those words when you said that.
Absolutely, right? I mean, it doesn't end. We're all works in progress.
Well, I want to celebrate you and all that you've done. And you're going to do plenty more while you're here. And you'll have another life to do ever more. You can come in with a fifth house Pluto maybe next time if you like.
Yeah.
I might take that to get you out there on the stage fully. But
Mm,
no, 12th house Pluto sounds pretty good too. It's important to remember that nothing is linear in the evolutionary astrology. Just because you have a sixth house Pluto, somebody won't have a seventh house Pluto next time, right?
mm.
Yeah. But one thing I think I'm most happy about is being a Sag. I don't know about you, but
Totally, totally. I mean, I have Pluto touching every planet in my chart except for Mars and the nodes.
oh,
Um,
unfortunate.
so, there is an acceleration of evolution in this lifetime for sure. But I do have to say that every door that's ever been opened to me by the universe, I went through with my heels down. Almost every single one of them.
Even
So there you go.
with your heels down, even meeting Roger and Jeffrey at the
Oh
same.
yeah, yeah. No, I argued with the universe about all that. I did. I did. Big
Oh,
arguments. Yeah. Yeah, I almost walked away from the whole like I'm not going to deal with Roger. I'm I even though I knew it was my work. Like when I went to the first workshop with Roger and I sat there, I'm like, "Oh my God, this is what I've been waiting for." Um but yeah, yeah, no, I did. I did. And every single time, I mean, even when I met my shamanic teacher, I went through that door with my heels down. But my soul magnetically pulled me to, there was that magnetism and that whoops. I don't want to get over. I think that, part of it is the feeling of being overwhelmed, like dragged into something, just overwhelmed.
well, wanting to
Um,
be in control of the process a little bit, maybe, right? You think any of that? Because once you get dragged into something, and I know that happened to me the first time I walked through the EA door, I knew something was coming and that I wasn't going to be able to stop because
yeah, right.
you know, and I needed some control of how fast things were going to happen. It's scary. I'm
Well,
worried.
I mean, I have to tell you that what I'm doing today was never an ideation of mine, ever. I had no ideation ever of,
Yeah.
I'm gonna teach, none of that, I just wanted to be, when I was in high school, I wanted to be a therapist. I love doing that. I love the
You are
human
doing
psyche.
that.
Huh?
You're doing that on like a
Yeah,
level.
no, I am. I mean, I know I am now, but that was was when we speak of desire, right? That was a desire, a serious desire, that or a dolphin trainer. So
Oh, wow.
I wanted to work with dolphins. So it was like, okay, there's my Virgo Pisces, right?
We'll call that
There's my Virgo Pisces. I want to be a therapist and be of service and train dolphins on the side.
all right. Well, I mean, now you're going to be thinking about this. What's next for the rest of your life? I hope you're resting some too, and I hope you're enjoying this
Yeah,
work that you.
yeah. I'm getting settled. I mean, there's things that are coming into my life now that I haven't had in a while, like a relationship, and that's something to savor that process.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, writing. I need to write more. I mean, I have a couple books in me still. And all my students are always yelling at me and helping me, wanting to help me, and I'm kind of like, yeah, okay.
Well,
No, okay.
we're looking forward to hearing more from you. And we really look forward to hearing what you have to share on October 6th through the 8th that weekend. So for
I
people,
did. It's really wonderful I mean, I know we're not going to be in person, but just to have everybody together again, and it's like a reunion, right?
absolutely, Jason called it a family reunion.
It is.
It is.
It is. It's a tribe, we are a tribe.
I hope we can do it live next time, but we will be together early October, astrally, psychically, spiritually, And thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
I loved meeting you from the beginning. It was just
Oh,
insane.
you too. You too. You are such a Vesta in this work, right? Where is your Vesta, by the
It's
way?
in Cancer on my ascendant.
Oh, of course. See, I picked that up. I mean, look at you. You are like the torchbearer of evolutionary astrology. Come on.
It's in the 12th house, though, so it feels very 12th house.
Yeah, yeah. But I see it.
All right. It feels
All
good.
right.
Anyways, so much love to you. Thank you for sharing a space with me today, Patricia, or Pat, however you like to be called. Either way, we'll
Thank
see you
you.
in October. All right.
Okay.
Namaste.